Today, let's talk about the raging, nasty, I don't even know what you want to call it, debate right now between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin maximalists, and everybody. Who knows? But there's a lot to unpack over some of the recent crypto Twitter drama. So I want to dive into that. Talk about Square a little bit today and a bunch more in today's episode. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Crypto Bobby. I hope you are having a great day, great night, wherever you're watching or listening in from. And today, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about some of the conversation around Bitcoin maximalism recently, because there was a conference that was really billed and essentially was a Bitcoin quote-unquote maximalist conference in Texas. Barbecue looked fantastic. I've actually never been to Austin, Texas, and really got to get that barbecue, so I missed out on that. But there was the BitBlock Boom conference, and there was one conversation in particular that I think kind of really ruffled a lot of feathers in the greater crypto ecosystem. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the drama around that and kind of give my take and dive into that a little bit more. I also want to talk about Square. Square made a really big hire. If you're hiring, shout out Proof of Talent. But Square made a really big hire. Matt Corallo was covered in CoinDesk, The Block, a bunch of different places. And I think the way Square is approaching their crypto exchange, or let's not even say exchange, but the way Square is approaching Bitcoin is really cool and really interesting. It needs to be discussed a little bit more. So we'll get into that as well. Today's episode is brought to you by my friends over at eToro. They recently opened up shop in the US, so as a lot of companies are leaving, they're coming in to service the US trader base. They actually have 10 million traders across the globe right now on eToro, and you can actually view the live portfolios of the top traders to see what they're trading, what they're doing, and engage directly with them, participate in their community. And you can view historical success, what percentage of their returns have been, and what they've done over time, what they've traded, full transparency. It's really cool. And one of the awesome features that they have coming out in the near future is the copy trader feature that they have, where you can actually copy the trades of some of the top traders, crypto traders in the industry. So definitely recommend checking out eToro. You go to the link below or cryptobobby.com/eToro to check it out. So if you were on crypto Twitter this weekend, you probably saw the world burning down, or the Bitcoin versus Ethereum world burning down and going at each other like dogs versus cats or dogs versus dogs or whatever. I don't even know. But people are going at each other, and in many and not nice ways. And it was a really interesting thing to watch. And for me, really tried, for the most part, not to participate in it. But I want to start this off by saying putting people in large buckets and overgeneralizing everybody is typically a recipe for disaster. Not every single person that is a Bitcoin maximalist thinks one way. Not every person that is an Ethereum fan thinks one way. Not every person that eats steak thinks one way. Not every person that is a vegan or likes the New York Jets or likes Ripple, I don't even know, thinks a specific way. So just overgeneralizing is typically a bad recipe when it does come down to forming your own opinions. With that said, the craziness for this weekend happened from the BitBlock Boom conference, which was really billed and focused as a Bitcoin maximalist conference. If anybody was there in Texas, would love to hear about it. Just your thoughts. Look, for the given audience, for the people that were there, very passionate group of individuals, the type of people that should have been there. Sounds like we're there. And the biggest, or one of the biggest things that came from the conference was this conversation from Michael Goldstein at Bitstein on Twitter, and who is somebody that is a vocal proponent of Bitcoin and not other cryptocurrencies, which you would bill, don't want to say this in a derogatory term, but as a Bitcoin maximalist. He only really likes Bitcoin. Works with the Nakamoto Institute and some other companies in the space. And he came out with this kind of speech about the art of Bitcoin rhetoric, how to meme Bitcoin to the moon, how to kind of navigate the social conversation to steer Bitcoin to success, but also from a monetary standpoint, how to kind of hashtag number go up it. And so looking at kind of how things went with this conversation, went with this speech, had some interesting things to say. And I think a lot of it you can see when you look at Twitter, the way in which many people in the Bitcoin world and also in other crypto kind of subsets look at things. He kind of looked at how to define the landscape of the crypto industry, how to define the path to victory. And one of the things I think was kind of interesting is, and one of the things that got a lot of heat was what he talked about of when to argue, when to troll, kind of defining people as shitcoiners or multi-coiners or no-coiners or journalists, and how to kind of look at who you should speak to, how you should speak to them, and what happens also when you're arguing within group. But a couple different things that I thought were interesting from the conversation. Talked about relentless propaganda and said rule number one, there is no bad news for Bitcoin, which if you are on crypto Twitter, if you are on Bitcoin Twitter, you know that to be the case. So seeing that it's pretty funny, where he says basically always anchor on the most bullish position for something. You specify the nuisance there as needed, as deserved, but always rule number one, there is no bad news for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes up, it's great news. If Bitcoin goes down, it's an opportunity to buy more. If there is a company that does something with Bitcoin, it's good news. If there's a company that chooses to not do something with Bitcoin, that's good news. Everything is good news for Bitcoin in the long run, and you should always be bullish, which is kind of funny in the way that was presented. But where things probably got a little bit dicey, or where things kind of started to maybe get a little bit more aggressive, is the talk about this kind of propaganda of crushing no coiners and showing no mercy. So if you're somebody that doesn't like Bitcoin, you will be crushed. You will not be shown any mercy because you are not participating in this ecosystem that is, you're not participating in an ecosystem, Bitcoin, that is, hard money, Austrian economics is supposed to do good for the world, distribute wealth better, etc. So if you are not interested in participating in that, you will be crushed. You will not be shown any mercy. And then also looking into kind of specifically going at what I would say like the Ethereum crowd of folks, where you have individuals that you look at kind of ad hominem discussions and rejecting an argument because of the person who is making it and how they're making it. So something that kind of really, I think, lit the ecosystem up, and you had Bitcoiners on one side of the house, and then you had Ethereum folks on the other side of the house, really just going after each other because you had people that quote unquote speak for Bitcoin in one hand, and you have people that speak for Ethereum in the other. And to say this too, everybody has the right to their own opinion. Do you have to agree with it? No. Do I necessarily agree with everything in this deck? No, I don't. Do I think that Michael is a bad person for saying it? Absolutely not. Do I think people that disagree with him are bad people for disagreeing with him? Absolutely not. The one thing that is very obvious always on Twitter, and also when you meet people in person in the crypto space, if you ever have met anybody at a meetup or things like that, most of the people that you'll meet in person are very nice humans. Very, very nice humans. And then you might see them on Twitter and be like, geez, this person is unhinged, or they're this, or they're that. There is typically a pretty vast difference between how people are online and how people are in person. And I do think that just kind of contributes to some of the disagreements that people have overall, and I think is overall kind of bad for the industry as a whole. But this is something where I think that you kind of have to look at the ecosystem as a whole and separate and form your own opinions. I think that for me, I look at some of the things that were said in this deck, and I don't necessarily agree with them. I would probably be classified as a quote-unquote shitcoiner by some of these folks. Now, I own Bitcoin. I also own Ethereum. I also own Tezos. I also own Leo. Is what it is. Do I think that Bitcoin is has the best chance of success out of all those things? Absolutely. Am I most bullish on Bitcoin? Absolutely. Do I speculate on other assets? Yes, I do. Do I think that no coiners in my mind, do I think that they should be crushed and they should submit? My mom's a no coiner. My dad's a no coiner. They don't know what Bitcoin is. They don't, quite frankly, have enough time in their day to care about it. And I don't really feel like pitching them Bitcoin. So I don't think that all no coiners should necessarily be, submit. So no, I don't agree with everything that's been said in this. But I also think that splashing a vast just, a big bucket of everybody as a Bitcoiner as a bad person or an Ethereum person as a bad person is probably not the best move at all. And I'm not saying anybody in the scenario is a bad person. I just think that people could use a little bit of introspection, when we go after these things. And that's my take on the matter. I think that it was a pretty crazy thing to just sit back and watch the world burn. And sometimes, especially online, it's best to just kind of relax, take it easy. And if you're not saying anything nice, then run the hell away and delete the Twitter app for the weekend. So that was just my thoughts on a little bit of the Bitcoin versus Ethereum drama this weekend. Got a little bit crazy, and can leave it at that for the most part. To that point too, though, I do think that an interesting thread, an interesting conversation, and again, having a Bitcoin bag, having an ETH bag, an interesting kind of thing that's been happening right now really is the purebred focus and confidence on Bitcoin, and basically every other altcoin is just nobody, like very, very few people, if any, have confidence in these assets. And granted, 99% of altcoins are total crap. So is what it is. But looking at something like Ethereum is getting its butt kicked against its Bitcoin trading pairing. And even a lot of the mid to larger cap altcoins are really getting their butts kicked against Bitcoin. And you have now this kind of core group of Ethereum folks. And you also see a lot of kind of arguments between Bitcoin, between Ethereum, and people just going at each other. And from an investment perspective, Chris Berniski, who I always enjoy his commentary on, some people like him, maybe some people don't agree with his commentary, but Chris had a tweet storm, or I shouldn't say tweet storm, it was 2 tweets. But Chris tweeted today, about an hour or so ago, he said, ETH or Ethereum is enduring its first mainstream bear market just as Bitcoin did in 2014, 2015. In retrospect, 2014, 2015 was the best risk-reward period for investors to get Bitcoin exposure. To objective observers, the network's momentum was clear despite the bearish price action. Those predisposed to dislike based upon perceived vested interests were blinded by biases and missed the bus. What happened to Bitcoin then is happening to ETH now. Stack sats, earn ETH. And I do agree with him. Granted, I'm biased. I have Ethereum. I own ETH. But I do agree with Chris here. And I'll talk to a little bit like why. Because I do think that for me, at least, when looking at Bitcoin, I got into Bitcoin in December 2013. I bought the Bitcoin top. I bought Bitcoin when it was at $800, and it dropped all the way to $200. As that drop continued to happen, I lost a lot of confidence just in like Bitcoin as a whole. I wasn't actively trading. I had a full-time job. I was doing my own thing. So in hindsight, that period of 2014, 2015, where I lost some confidence and lost some interest and wasn't keeping as kind of in touch in the industry as I should have, I missed out on a lot of opportunity and missed out on a really good opportunity to buy a lot more Bitcoin than I could have. Now I look at what's happening with Ethereum, and you see this massive pullback. Bitcoin or Ethereum topped out at $1,400 during the bull run of 2017, 2018. Bitcoin topped out at about $20,000. Bitcoin is now at, let's say, $11,000. You have Ethereum at $200, give or take. So looking at where Ethereum is right now, Ethereum is way down in comparison to its all-time high in comparison to Bitcoin. And there have been some really nice improvements in the Ethereum ecosystem over the past year or so. When Ethereum pumped to $1,400, was that justified? No, not at all. When I'm sure a lot of that was driven up by demand from ICOs and things of that nature, but when Ethereum pumped to $1,400, that really wasn't justified as far as the tech behind it. Now you have a lot more infrastructure in place. So I do look at this time frame now where I'm looking at Ethereum, I'm looking at the price of ETH and thinking, now is a really opportune time to continue to dollar cost average into Ethereum. And to provide insight too, I dollar cost average 2-to-1 Bitcoin to Ethereum. So for example, $50 a week into ETH, $100 a week into Bitcoin, something like that. So I dollar cost average into Bitcoin, into Ethereum. And I look to continue to buy into ETH. I still think that it is an interesting time it's an interesting time, and in comparison to other assets, it's undervalued. So, hey, that's just kind of where my head's at. But I really do agree with Chris kind of in his thought process here. And lastly, this kind of got brought up in my head a little bit by Square hiring Matt Corallo, who was previously working on Bitcoin at Chaincode and also at Blockstream, but Chaincode most recently. And I heard Matt speak, it was a while ago, but it was at a Lightning meetup in New York City. And I really, really liked Matt's just kind of perspective and his thought process on the Bitcoin development industry. And just, I thought he was a very relatable person. Not to say that, Michael Goldstein's kind of approach is negative at all. Not to say that's negative. That doesn't necessarily resonate with me as an individual. The memeing Bitcoin, or just kind of some of the more, let's say, aggressive stances as far as how to deal with people, that doesn't necessarily resonate with me as much. The type of attitude that Matt had, really just like when I heard him, it kind of resonated with me. It clicked with me. I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting approach. And so Matt got hired by Square to develop exclusively on Bitcoin and the public infrastructure that is utilized by with Bitcoin. And I think that it's really interesting because Square is kind of the opposite of some of these other crypto assets. And outside of the hiring of Matt, now just want to dive into Square and why I think Square is really interesting. Because if you're not familiar with Square, I'm sure many of you are, but Square is a large company now. Their market capitalization, they're a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. The market cap is around $27 billion. They do over $1 billion in revenue a quarter, I think, probably pacing. Last year in 2018, they did $3 billion in revenue. This year, pacing over $4 billion. So Square is a big company, over $4 billion in revenue. They have a number of business lines. Most of what they do, probably, I don't know the exact number, but I would venture to say 99.9% or 99% of the revenue and 99% of the work that they do is completely unrelated to Bitcoin. And why this is interesting is because they created Square Crypto, and you can actually now buy Bitcoin through the Cash App. It's a really great app. It's worth checking out as well. The Cash App is fantastic, but you can now buy Bitcoin through the Cash App, and now Square has been making this push into Bitcoin. Why is it cool? Why is it interesting that they're doing this, and also kind of hiring people like Matt Corallo to develop on, to develop with Bitcoin? They've also hired a former Google director as well, and they've been hiring for other positions, other engineers. Why is that interesting? Well, because of Square, they're a publicly traded company. They bring in over $3 billion in revenue a year. That is unrelated to crypto. They can contribute to the ecosystem in a way that is well-intentioned and kind of thoughtful to the future. There are some companies in the crypto space, or basically every company in the crypto space, let's say, many of the companies in the crypto space are either venture-backed, so they have professional venture investors, or maybe they did an ICO and they have retail investors that are pressuring them to do something. So either way, there are companies in the space that have investors that are kind of pushing them to do something. So, let's say if you look at Coinbase adding a bunch of different assets to the Coinbase exchange. Some people think that that's unnecessary. Other people look at them adding assets and they say, okay, well, they have, they're trying to bring in more revenue. They're trying to develop the user base more and do a number of things like that. Well, kind of Square can take this slow approach of saying, you know what? We don't need the revenue from Square Crypto. We don't need to be making money here, or we don't need to be making money here yet. We don't need to be adding other assets here yet. We can kind of take our time and be slow and be thoughtful and methodical with how we do things, because we are supported by a massive company and we have the resources to pay high salaries, or to bring in fantastic talent from Chaincode, from Google, and from all these places. So I think that the way in which they have a really nice luxury of being a small part of this massive business and being supported by the CEO, Jack Dorsey, who is pro Bitcoin and who wants to push this industry further. And they're able to do that through Square. So to me, it is kind of a cool approach and gives them just a more maybe intelligent, kind of measured way to build things, instead of some companies in the crypto space that rush to do something because they think that they need the users, or they're just a little bit more short-sighted in nature, let's say. So that's fantastic. And then also to the point that, Matt and some of these other engineers that Square's hiring, they're contributing to Bitcoin as, they're contributing to Bitcoin as a whole. Like, Matt's going to focus exclusively on Bitcoin. It is cool to see companies that have, large amounts of money in the bank who are profiting from Bitcoin to actually pay for the continued development of the network. I think that's important and something that is going to be really, nice and important in the future, because there is a problem. There are economic incentive misalignments behind open source software development. So something to think about. Would love your thoughts there too. But if you enjoyed this video by any chance, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, hit that like button. Would love your thoughts on the whole commentary of Bitcoin versus Ethereum and some of the nastiness that went on there. So would love your thoughts in the comments, or if you're listening on the podcast, make sure at @crypto_Bobby on Twitter. Would always love to hear from you there. Thank you guys so much for your time. If you're new, subscribe to the channel. Peace.